is agreed to by a majority of members present. I declare the motion passed. Employment Amendment Bill 2019. Government Bills. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Limited Partnership Fund Bill. Mr. Charles Mok.
Mr. Charles Mok. President will now resume the second reading debate on the Limited Partnership Fund Bill. Well, just a bit of background. Well, the members may not be too familiar with this bill all about. Well, Hong Kong as a wealth management hub, the funds really come in the form of unit trust or open-ended fund structure. Well, for this two common fund structure, really usually they're public funds or a hedge fund. Well, recent days, private equity fund are quite popular, and also they will use a limited liability partnership. So the sector has mentioned to the government hoping to have dropped this bill so that Hong Kong can set up a limited partnership registration regime to maintain the Hong Kong status as a wealth financial hub, so as to attract Hong Kong, attract them to come to Hong Kong for fund formation. As we can see globally, there's still a few dominant trends, one of which that some other countries, especially some of the fund management company, which choose to form their fund in the tax havens. However, these tax havens have been suffering from lots of problems of late, and also the UN and the respective governments have demanded this tax haven jurisdiction to improve their code of practice. And take Hong Kong, for example, some companies, even though the funds they manage is incorporated in Hong Kong, however, they, by way of shareholding, they were operating in other tax havens. So across the place around the world, they've been trying to attract fund formation in their countries. Our closest competitor, take Singapore, for example, as you can see that they've been will have other funds appointed the fund company, appoint fund managers for the investment vehicle, and had already draft legislation allowing him to do so. And for quite some time, from the administration, take Kent Leung, for example, well, you're not from the government. While we discuss with the government, or when we're discussing with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and the two CEOs claim that we are behind Singapore, and some of them already legislate allow it to have new ways to deal with such situations. In Hong Kong, it's still not happening. And before the drafting of this bill, they've told us, and global occasion, some fund managers have told them and pushed them to Hong Kong, when can we pass this bill? Well, they're actually interested, instead of relocating all of them to Singapore, they still want to develop business in Singapore. But in principle, we see that this bill as vital. Well, in normal circumstances, it's supposed to be conducive to the fund industry development in Hong Kong. But however, well, I suppose there will be a new normal these days, from trade to technology and to finance. In the recent global landscape, especially under the cloud of Hong Kong political problem, the risk keep rising. So therefore, I hope the administration, well, even for the finance sector as a financial hub, well, in order for the future development of the finance industry. Well, we should not be over politicized. Will fail to address the actual problems at hand or look the other way. Why I'm saying this? Well, when all the eyes focus on Hong Kong, well, it's only on the impact of national security law. Especially a few days ago, there was the launch of the implementation rules. Well, this is relevant, so please bear with me. I will not be long. For the implementation rules, a lot of people are concerned. Ask me on the electronic messages and whether some kind of electronic platforms will provide access to user information. Well, not these. Well, let's touch upon there's a part called freezing, restrict, or seize, or confiscate assets related to endangering national security. Well, it briefly mentioned. Well, the Secretary for Security, if on reasonable grounds suspect this asset would endanger national safety, and by written notice can instruction to anyone not to deal with the asset, and the court of first instance apply to the Secretary of Justice in order that the asset related to the offense to be confiscated. While this might not occur frequently, but in fact, the due process by the courts, well, is very much undermined and leave to the hands of the administration, and not even the SFST president, but rather for the Secretary for Security. Therefore, we have to be very careful, or to square list on the impact of the finance industry. We can't simplify things or the motive or the various scenarios. Well, the loyalists are going to say, then stop the violence and riots. If we return to peace, then everything will be fine. While these fund managers are not operating on Cha-Chan Teng, they care more about information freedom, financial stability, and also look at the geopolitical factors. Well, this bill, under normal circumstances, will definitely be beneficial to Hong Kong. I believe that it would not be detrimental to Hong Kong, but whether it will be effective, it depends on whether the government could be honest of their political pressure instead of deflecting the attention and pretend that such problems do not exist. Not just whether there will be capital flight, the talent drain may happen. The foreign governments has already been and trying to attract our talent, including our finance professionals. But in my short speech, I just want to tell we need to see Hong Kong through the post-national security law lens to evaluate every thing, including measures that will benefit the sector. A sound policy or bill, how can we make sure to achieve its intended advantage or objective? That's the challenge of the government. And I hope that in today's debate, there are more members can explain to the public so that they would understand that the problem faced with Hong Kong.
Mr. Kenneth Leung. President, this limited partnership fund bill's purpose is to introduce a relatively new legal framework that is about limited partnership, so that it can be used for as a class investment tool, so that for the registration liquidation and everything, there'll be a new regulation to regulate it. So instead of just setting up a trust or an open-ended fund company, so we call that OEIC, open-ended investment company. But then for these two legal forms, they are mainly used for the investment in some retail funds and also hedge funds. But then for private equity funds, like venture capital and also other investment funds, this partnership system would be more appropriate. During the past few years, if you look at the OECD, Organization for Economic and Cultural Development, well, after the relevant convention has been implemented in Hong Kong, in fact, it was extended to Hong Kong 2 years ago. Many PE funds have already started to move from Cayman Islands and also BVI to areas where they can have some business operations. And obviously, Hong Kong would become one of the prime choice or premium choice for that. And given the fact that there are many PE funds that have chosen to come to Hong Kong, and in 2018, 2019, in both the budget and the policy address, the administration said that they would be looking into the possibility of setting up this limited partnership fund system. For those who are not very familiar with this form of investment, they might ask, well, for limited partnership fund, in fact, we have CAP 37 is about a limited partnership ordinance, so we have already got a piece of legislation on that. But then for the established system on partnership, it would not have been able to be applied to this very flexibly as an investment tool. Take, say, for example, conventionally for the limited partnership system that we have, we cannot just increase the capital casually, and it would also not enable us to distribute profits very conveniently. But then under this bill, it has taken reference from other jurisdictions where they have such a system in place, so that for this legal investment mechanism, it will become more flexible. And there would also be more straightforward dissolution mechanism. For example, if it has been invested in a venture capital, then 6 or 7 years down the road, then they can be dissolved very easily. So honestly, I think we are late by some 10, 12 years or even 15 years, because if you look at Ireland, Singapore, or even Cayman Islands, and even Luxembourg and the UK, in many places, they have already set up limited partnerships systems. And for our bill, in terms of the governance and also structure and also dissolution mechanism, in fact, we have taken reference from these jurisdictions. The most important part of this legislation is that if you want to register a limited partnership, you will have to have a registered office and also 2 partners, including 1 general partner and also 1 or more limited partners. And for the general partner, he has to take up a more important responsibility, and where there are liabilities and also commitments, this general partner will have to take up unlimited liabilities. And then for the limited partner, under this bill, in fact, he or they will be the investors. In fact, in many PEs or PE funds, they would also have many limited partner investors. In some cases, they may have over 20. And of course, they would also have this contract of partners which will regulate them so that between the general partner and the limited partners, that would also define their responsibilities and liabilities and so on. But then, once the limited partnership deed or agreement is signed, you will have to meet all the conditions under the bill, and they are not supposed to do anything beyond the empowerments of this bill. And of course, this bill will also offer some safe harbor activities to these funds so that even if they are engaging in some limited activities in Hong Kong, they would not be deemed to have made certain profits from Hong Kong, so much so that such profits would be liable to profit tax in Hong Kong. And I'm not going to set out such activities in detail because they are basically converging with international practice. So other than encouraging the development of PE funds, many in the service industry would also benefit. For example, accountants, lawyers, and also fund managers, including those working at the back office. So many different professions and trades would also benefit. So many professionals will benefit from this. And under the new system, there will be a registration system, and it will be run by our registrar of companies, and the applicant will have to submit their application through an agent. And then for the general partner, will have to submit the annual return to the registrar, and he would also have to appoint an investment manager. And of course, this investment manager will also have to comply with the requirements for actuaries ordinance. So there would also have to be an independent auditor who would be responsible for checking the financial returns of this company on an annual basis, and also qualified professionals and also the legal person would also have to comply with certain rules and regulations under the AML and CTF provisions. So for CAP 615, which is the AML and CTF legislation, so to the limited partnership funds, the management of these companies would also have to pay attention to that. So my view is that this regulatory regime is rather relaxed, and I'm in favor of this light-handed approach when it comes to this particular form of partnership. Hong Kong is a very important PE fund management center, and it's also a very important asset management center. We all know it. By the end of 2019, the number of PE funds working in Hong Kong, there are 560 of them, and then for the assets under management, we're talking about $160 billion. So it ranks number 2 in Asia, second only to the PRC. And then globally, the biggest the top 20, will have some three-fourths of them have set up their branch office or subsidiaries in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong does have a very solid foundation when it comes to such funds. But then we do have room to further promote the development of such PE funds. As Mr. Mok just said, I'm very concerned about the national security law, which might have an impact on the asset management industry and also the PE funds, because it will cause a lot of unsettling effect, and there might be turmoils, and both the CE and the administration will have to offer a solution to this. I can give you a very simple and straightforward example, and the CE and the Central People's Government will have to think about it. For the PE fund, let's say if it's a US based PE fund with mainly general partners, and they are required to comply with certain U.S. sanctions. For example, for sensitive industries like the military industry, for example, for military industries, they can also make investments, and they have also set up a company that is a limited partnership fund in Hong Kong. Let's say they have set up this PE fund in Hong Kong, but then they would also have to comply with the guidelines so that they would not be allowed to invest in certain prohibited industries. So they will have to comply with such regulations, whether it's a general partner from Europe or a U.S. Investor, because the parent company is in the U.S. or in Europe. But then they do have an established office in Hong Kong. Well, under the circumstances, and of course, if we were to adopt a more relaxed approach about this, there is a chance, or there is a very high likelihood, that it could have breached the national security law, because they're actually helping for overseas governments or foreign governments to impose sanctions on us. For example, if they say that they would not be investing in certain companies, well, this is legitimate, and it's highly likely that this can happen. So in that event, then for the fund manager or the general partner involved in this case, what are they supposed to do? Well, when the national security law was mooted, of course, we didn't have a chance to take a look at it. But then I was saying that, the press can be given a waiver. And then what about the auditing sector? Can we also be granted an exemption so that we would not be affected by the national security law? I've heard many main officials say that we can increase the provisions. Then, of course, you can have more exemptions. What about the investment sector? Can they be exempted so that under the national security law, there might be certain offenses? And if the investment sector can enjoy some major exemptions under the national security law, then I'm sure this bill will give confidence to international investors so that the asset management companies or such partnership systems or partnership funds can come to Hong Kong to register, so that they do not have to worry about what is going to happen later, or when they make an investment decision later, they will be able to tell their regulator, for example, the U.S. securities authorities, that they might inadvertently set their foot on the wrong side of the law. Because if there are problems, then whether it's the Hong Kong national security law or their own parent company, which will have to comply with the domestic legislation of their own jurisdiction, then whatever they have done or have failed to do, they might be inadvertently committing an offense and they would be subject to sanction. So all in all, Mr. President, I support this bill's resumption of second reading and also the third reading. But then before we are able to resolve the negative impact brought about by the national security law, I do have very strong reservation as to how effective is it going to be for us to attract more investment to Hong Kong. So I hope that our government and the CPG will have to think hard about this. Should we also offer a comprehensive or partial exemption under the national security law? Thank you.
Dr. K.K. Kwok, President. We are now examining the Limited Partnership Fund Bill. Having heard what Mr. Kenneth Leung said, I have the feeling that we are living in a parallel universe. The bill is about improving our investment environment and to attract more funds to come to Hong Kong and to make use of our limited partnership fund regime, I think these are all things of the past. On the 30th of June, the national security law was promulgated. And now we face a stiffer challenge, and that is how Hong Kong's economy will go into a recession. Just today, the Australian government suspended the operation of their extradition arrangements with Hong Kong, and they have passed a law to allow a new Hong Kong graduates in Australia and those with a valid visa to prolong their stay for another 5 years. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. The pro-establishment are cheering for the national security law, and at long last, we have this supreme national security law. However, the whole world has seen how one country, two systems, and a high degree of autonomy are buried for Hong Kong. After the handover, indeed, Hong Kong has benefited from its very liberal systems and also the rule of law, which we once respected. And also, we had a very clean and efficient government. All these attracted many overseas investors to come to Hong Kong. Among them are these funds. But what do we face today? In the last couple of years, we have seen how rating institutions, including Moody's, are downgrading Hong Kong's credit rating. Yesterday, it was reported in the news, I hope it will not come true, and that is the U.S. Congress has considered restricting HSBC's right to exchange Hong Kong dollars with U.S. dollars. So what we face here is a downturn in our economy to the state of a total collapse, and also how our investment environment has been destroyed. Starting from last year, the government wanted to use police brutality and tried to pass the extradition bill. Please come back to the bill we're discussing, the Limited Partnership Fund bill. Yes, I'm coming back. All these behavior of the government are the major causes of the heavy blow dealt to our economy. All right, this bill is about a limited partnership fund, and also all limited partnerships registered under Limited Partnerships Ordinance Cap 337 will then be more able to attract new funds and also investments to choose Hong Kong as a base for registration. But if you don't have a mirror, you can look into a basin of water. Many fund managers and investors have already shifted their assets to other parts of the world in order to find refuge. Will new investors come to Hong Kong? I have great worries given the latest developments. Under the national security law, all people, since it is such a supreme piece of legislation, now fund managers, operators, and their employees will not be exempt from the jurisdiction of the law in Hong Kong. They may come from different jurisdictions. They may enjoy freedoms there, but once they're in Hong Kong, they will not be able to enjoy such freedoms. So long as they have indicated their support for democracy And if they have expressed sympathy for people like Nathan Ho, Joshua Wong, and members of the Demosisto, they will be regarded as trying to influence the state power, and they might be prosecuted under the national security law, and they may be subject to torture in order to get a confession. I think what we are talking here is already history. Now, I think we have seen a fact which is exactly the opposite of what's in this LPF fund. The Office of National Security just set up in Hong Kong. In fact, the director 9 years ago was responsible, one of the leaders of a village in Guangdong, which cracked down on rights or fight to defend their rights. This is really a joke. Mr. KK Kwok, please come back to the bill. Yes, I'm coming back. We hope that through this LPF bill, we can attract more foreign investors, fund managers, investors, and the subsidiary companies to invest in Hong Kong. However, now I've made it very clear, Chairman. After hearing what Mr. Kenneth Leung said, I agree with him, and I support the bill. The bill is well-intentioned, hoping that Hong Kong can move on in our economy. However, we are being dragged down by the national security law. Why has this government done such a thing to damage or destroy our investment environment? I understand that the current secretary comes from DAB, a political party. Now, as far as I know, there are many businessmen in this DAB. Since you're so close to the CPG as well as the Hong Kong SAR government, why didn't you lobby them against promulgating the national security law to cause Hong Kong to lose its luster? In fact, we are caught in the middle, and there is very little room for maneuver. Our competitors in Asia include Singapore and also Malaysia, which is rising, as well as Taiwan. Other places are using various ways and means to attract foreign investors, to use their countries as a base of investment. But what happens here is exactly the opposite. We have been dealt a severe blow by the Fugitive Offenders Bill as well as the COVID-19. We were hoping that there would be a reconciliation through investigation of the police brutality, and there would also be amnesty for those arrested so that we can have conciliation. And to the contrary, we have the national security law. Of course, we're in a parallel universe. We are discussing the MPF bill to attract investors, and on the other side, the government is doing something that actually negate what is being done here. What the government has done is driving the fund managers away. I am pessimistic. If anyone hopes that by means of this bill, Hong Kong will have new impetus for growth, please consider ask the administration to withdraw the national security law under the basic law so that Hong Kong will be in a position to attract overseas investors again, including these investment funds to come to operate in Hong Kong. In the long run, we must rely on being a free port to attract foreign investors. Freedom is not something you can quantify or something you can blow your own trumpet. some mainland officials praised the rule of law of the mainland yesterday. In fact, it should be evaluated by other parties. The whole world, including investors, are now watching and observing our development. How can you imagine that professionals like fund managers are thinking of ways to flee Hong Kong? They are using more relaxed plans to attract fund managers to places like Japan, the UK, Australia. Now, these countries are thinking of such initiatives. So when we introduce the MPF bill, why don't we realize that the national security law, a draconian law, will only drive our investors and fund managers away? The U.S.-China trade war is raging, and Hong Kong used to be a neutral and impartial place to attract funds from different parts of the world. We have damaged our very unique position, so we're no longer open and free place protected by its own institutions. Now, if foreign investors cannot make a distinction between Hong Kong and the mainland, if the spirit and basis of the legal system is just the same when it comes to Hong Kong and the mainland, how can investors be willing to make use of this MPF regime to invest in Hong Kong? Many of them are thinking of moving their assets away from Hong Kong. They're trying to sell their assets. Fund management will provide business to professional services such as lawyers, accountants, and company secretaries, etc. I think it hinges upon the government. If you blindly think that the national security law will bring security to Hong Kong, it may result in the exact opposite. People will have less trust in Hong Kong, and people can vote by their feet. The NS law has just been passed a short while ago. The consequences may not be clear to us, but a few years on, if we look back and consider that important threshold, that important watershed on the 30th of June 2020. Before that, we're expecting that Hong Kong will continue to enjoy a high degree of autonomy and Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong. But after the 30th of June 2020, everything was buried by this national security law. Hong Kong, after the 30th of June, is no longer what it used to be. The vibrancy and the liveliness are no longer here. If we want Hong Kong to continue to prosper and enjoy stability, why don't we let Hong Kong enjoy a high degree of autonomy, let Hong Kong people rule Hong Kong and have real one country, two systems? If they think that using this restriction, they can allow Hong Kong people to prosper and thrive, they're wrong. Hong Kong people are voting by their feet. And statistics on immigration applications and sending children overseas to study are evidence of what has happened. This government has harmed Hong Kong by dealing a very heavy blow to us, and this is the greatest crime this government has committed. This is most sad. I will not oppose the bill, but I have great reservations to this bill, given the situation we're in. Thank you.
Mr. Holden Chow. President, I speak to support this limited partnership fund bill. Before I speak I just want to refute Dr. K.K. Kwok's ramblings. He's spent at length claiming the passage of the NSL law will undermine our business freedom and keep smearing the NSL. If you know the SNL want to protect the safety of Hong Kong people and getting rid of the black cloud violence and terrorism. In the long run, they'll bring a stable business environment. Thus, I must refute Dr. K.K. Kwok's ramblings. First, well, back to this bill, President. According to a survey, in Hong Kong there are 560 private equity and venture capital firms managing about 160 billion of assets, and now the second largest private equity hub next to the mainland. As the number of private equity investors in mainland kept rising, this investor have kept on expanding their business inside and outside China, and well, they will have a lot of potential for the private equity sector. Unfortunately, looking at the current registration fund structure, they're not well equipped to develop. Under existing region are two types of funds. One will be the unit trust, and another type, an open-ended fund company. Well, these two fund structures apply to their public funds, mutual funds, or hedge funds. Well, in Hong Kong, we do have a limited partnership in Hong Kong, and also a limited partnership ordinance, Cap 37, and allow the setting up of the limited partnerships. However, the old provisions are not suitable for private equity, especially for capital contributions and distribution of profits, and also the partnership agreement lack flexibility and no straightforward dissolution mechanism. At the same time, I must point out that looking at the LPO Cap 37, it was enacted about a century ago, 1912. Well, the original version, and after so the passage of time, is not applicable to the development needs of the modern fund industry. While the private equity sector hoped to introduce a new limited partnership regime to satisfy for the application. President, I would like to say that the landscape for the private equity sector and how this bill could able to bring business opportunities to Hong Kong. Most recently, was a popular private equity jurisdiction, as there was some of a cross-border tax evasion and money laundering, and the anti-terrorism financing, and also of CTF would introduce legislation. For example, Cayman Islands in 2008 December and 2019 June, and also enacted the Cayman Islands global taxation practice law is to target to the highly mobile industry as well on the base erosion and profit shifting packages. While the practice rules have introduced certain reporting and requirements, and these entities must file annual returns to the tax authorities there. And these requirements would affect the fund managers incorporated in the Cayman Islands, and the fund managers will need to comply with this to even tougher supervision. And February 7, 2020, the private equity law has been enacted in the Cayman Islands. This law requires the closed-end funds to register under the financial authority. Well, for this kind of reform packages, led to great uncertainty for fund formation, and due to such uncertainty, the market able to form a common view on the market impact. Against this backdrop, this limited partnership fund bill amendment package can bring new opportunities to Hong Kong to attract outside property funds as their fund domicile. And besides the mainland, and also the Greater Bay Area financial hub, well, if we have foreign private equity entering Hong Kong, I believe for Hong Kong to maintain its strong status, I believe that it would definitely be effective. Furthermore, well, in terms of internationalization of renminbi, it had a vital role to play, and want to make use of our financial landscape and providing relative convertibility. We believe that by way of the limited partnership bill, it would support the internationalization of renminbi, would actually dovetail with such effort. And for this bill, some kind of arrangements hope to attract private equity sector in offering some kind of flexibility, including there will be no restriction on the investment scope, a relatively flexible capital injection and profit sharing mechanism, and the partners can freely enter contracts, and the limited partners can also conduct a wide range of safe harbor activities. And finally, there will also be a cost-efficient, straightforward dissolution mechanism. So in view of all this, I noticed that the features in this bill, I believe that it will help the equity to operate in Hong Kong. And furthermore, compared to other private equity fund domiciles, the Cayman Islands will also have this provisions against double taxation. And for those who would like to set up shop in Hong Kong, that would also be attractive. Thus, I must point out that I think this bill could help to facilitate market development. I must point out some of the views towards this bill to the Bureau. As I see that in terms of the supervision of this limited partnership venture, and the arrangements will only rely on the company registry. Well, the CR itself, after serious amendments to the company ordinance, I believe that they were quite overloaded. Well, after this bill is passed, we also need to supervise this private equity funds, help the departments. The CR must be equipped with enough manpower for good, proper governance. We at least want to see that these conducive measures come across proper implementation or inadequate supervision. This will in turn affect our reputation. Hope that the Bureau can coordinate with the company registry to assign enough manpower for proper supervision. At the same time, in the past we noticed the fund management would involve some securities arrangement. For this bill, we don't set up a bills committee. So allow me to share my 2 cents. Have the Bureau considered, as the private equity fund come to operation, was adopted limited partnership structure, they would inevitably touch on asset management, would deal with securities. I want to find out, well, the company registry will be the first gatekeeper as expressed in the bill, while the Securities Futures Commission, I wonder if they would have any role to play. I hope that I can hear from some representation from the Bureau. Well, this SFC play a very important role in regulating financial markets, and yet this bill had to do with help facilitating the registration of private equity fund under the new limited partnership structure. But I want to find out what kind of role the SFC will play. Well, I so submit.
Mr. Ray Chen. The administration has proposed this limited partnership fund bill, and their justifications are that Hong Kong's assets and wealth management industry can see some improvements upon the enactment of this bill. And in the LegCo brief, the administration said that in recent years, in terms of the dynamics for the increase in portfolio allocation to the Asian markets, and also the deepening of financial market liberalization in mainland China, all these are beneficial to Hong Kong's development as a premier international asset and wealth management center in the region. So we have seen such a robust growth, and therefore the administration has been stepping up efforts to sharpen Hong Kong's competitive edge on asset and wealth management. And one of the key policy initiatives is to diversify our fund structures to encourage fund formation in Hong Kong. Well, this bill was introduced in mid-March this year, and of course in March we still hadn't have the national security law for Hong Kong. So my remarks today are to assess that in the wake of all the developments, will this bill be really able to strengthen Hong Kong's development as an international financial center, and given the latest developments, would that undermine the positive effect of this bill, and whether the administration should try to amend the limited partnership fund bill as soon as possible in order to realize the spirit of the national security law. Well, according to the paper, well, it can be an open-ended fund company, or it can also be in the form of a unit trust. But then the main purpose is to enable the PE funds and also the hedge funds so that they can form limited partnership funds in Hong Kong. These are the more common forms of such funds, and under Cap 37 of the Limited Partnerships Ordinance, the LPO, well, that was enacted about a century ago, and is not tailored to and cannot meet the needs of investment funds, which are relatively new, and therefore that's the reason why they have introduced this bill, in order to attract investment funds to come to Hong Kong to set up and also operate, in order to bring in more jobs for Hong Kong and also improve the business environment. So that's the reason why they have to introduce this brand new law. And the administration also expects that this law and the relevant policy initiatives will attract PE funds and also VC funds to come to Hong Kong, and that will also boost the development of Hong Kong to become the hub for wealth and asset management and so on and so forth. Of course, they have boasted such developments, but then just to set up this bill, can it really enable Hong Kong to become a financial center for PE funds? Because over the years, Hong Kong has been the third international financial center after only New York and London. But then there are certain requirements. First, freedom of information, so that the investors will be able to make whatever investment decisions that they like. They don't have to take up the political consequence of such decisions, and very often through PE funds, investors will be able to engage in activities which might not be palatable to many. For example, Soros used to attack the Hong Kong currency, but then he has also been able to raise funds under private equity funds, and also many reputable investors have also used private equity funds to attack a certain currency, and as a result of that, they have made huge profits. So they have made such investment decisions through PE funds, and apparently that would also undermine the interest of a particular community. And yet, under the circumstances, the administration would not interfere with such decisions. That's the characteristics of PE funds, and as international financial centers, that's the beauty and also the unpalatable part of it. But then, at the same time, even if we have enacted this limited partnership fund bill to facilitate investors so that they can set up PE funds in Hong Kong, but then can investors really make use of PE funds to really gamble on the serious spike in the Hong Kong dollar currency or nosediving of the Hong Kong dollar? So some politicians might view this as a violation of the national security law, because they are actually speculating on the Hong Kong stock market or the Hong Kong currency, and as a result that would also undermine national security. And would such investment behavior be viewed to have undermined national security? So when it comes to national security, it's not about using force or violence to attack national security. In fact, we might be talking about financial security, and even cultural security could also be treated as national security. So if this PE fund raised funds in overseas jurisdictions in order to attack the Hong Kong currency, would that be viewed as violating Article 29(4) of the National Security Law, because they are engaging in some hostile activity against the Hong Kong government? And if they invest in some VC fund, but then if the bosses have been found to possess banners having the slogans "Liberate Hong Kong" and "Revolution of the Time," so will they be investigated by the National Security Commission? So even if you have the limited partnership fund bill passed, you claim that it would bring about certain benefits, but then under the national security law, would it be counterproductive? Would it backfire? Because will investors be able to just invest in Hong Kong without having any concern about the possible consequences that would deal a blow to the sentiment of the investors to invest in Hong Kong? And under the bill is also a provision that they will have to appoint a manager who will be responsible for complying with the AML and also the CTF functions and so on, in order to comply with the FATF's requirements. And that manager will also have to be a professional or a legal professional and so on and so forth that have been specified in the law. But then how are they able to comply with the latest situation, that is with the national security law's requirement? Because the spirit of the national security law is that national security law will prevail over all the other laws in Hong Kong, including Cap 615. And Article 24 to 28 also talk about terrorism activities. And under these four articles, the definition of terrorist activities would also be somewhat different from the international standards, so long as you are classified by the Hong Kong government or the Commission for National Security as someone who is threatening the CPG. Then it might not be the same. It might not be the same as one that is defined under the international convention. And as a result of that, Part 5 of the Limited Partnership Fund Bill, that is with regard to the person responsible for discharging the functions of anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing functions, well, he might inadvertently be committing something that would be dealing with assets of the terrorists under the national security law, and as a result of that they might be committing an offense under the law. So even if this law is passed, right away, you will have to do something about it. You will have to review it to ensure that amendments can be made so that for Part 5, the person in charge would not just be complying with the requirement under Cap 615. That is, he will have to ensure that he will not be allowing terrorists as defined under the International Convention to come and invest in Hong Kong. He would also have to ensure that he will not be someone as defined under Article 24 to 28 of the National Security Law. And for those engaging in terrorist activities as defined by the National Security Law, even if he's not defined as a terrorist under international conventions, this person's assets cannot be processed in Hong Kong in order to realize the spirit of the national security law, and also in order to ensure that international investors in setting up private and equity funds in Hong Kong will have to understand what the national security law is all about, and they would also have to amend the limited partnership fund bill so that for every decision of the PE fund, they will have to take care of the sentiment or the feeling of the national organ and also the National Security Commission. They would also have to make reference to Part 5 of this law so that there needs to be a national security investment advisor under the bill. This is very constructive so that person will be scrutinizing the source of funds so that whether or not they would come from someone who is trying to subvert the security of China, and whether or not they might have intention to separate Hong Kong from the rest of China, and whether or not he will attack the Hong Kong dollar currency, and to ensure that it will only be investing in VC funds that love Hong Kong and love the country. So these are startups that love both the country and Hong Kong. All right, they have the statements issued. All right, if you make statements and if you're trying to separate China or split up China and change the status of state organs and so on, well, these are things that we ordinary guys would not be able to understand. And also for this advisor, he would also have to take the initiative to inform the National Security Commission about the source of funds for these funds and also the investment situation for these funds. Well, it's better that he does more than less, so that if there are any activities that would violate the provisions of the national security law, even if the National Security Commission does not know about it, he will also have to set out the mitigating circumstances. Only then would he be able to realize the spirit of the national security law. All right, I'm coming to the end of it, President. So please don't think that these financial related or financial based legislation would have nothing to do with national security, because once the national security law is enacted, it is an all-embracing law, because as it says out, it will cover everything. And it's an umbrella legislation that will cover every aspect of our life. So please do not think that it will not be affected, because the national security law will mean that you will have to review everything. Well, in this case, we are talking about realizing the spirit of the national security law. You might say that I don't have to do anything at all, but then as the national security law is above everything, is above all laws in Hong Kong, and therefore they don't have to make reference to local legislation. In fact, this is not a healthy situation. So next year, next term of this council will be very busy, because we will have to review each and every piece of our legislation in order to ensure that the investment acts of PE funds will not be deemed to have undermined the security of both China and Hong Kong. All right, coming back to my conclusion, I'd say that, well, for those who say that the national security law is something that will stabilize Hong Kong, is the panacea for all the problems and so on and so forth. Well, even if the stock market doesn't rise at all, so long as you stay at the bottom of the valley, it will remain stable. So it's very good. So we think that the national security law is wrong medication for the wrong illness. And in fact, it's going to destabilize Hong Kong, because under the circumstances, Hong Kong is no longer a place whereby investors can invest whatever they want in Hong Kong is no longer an international investment center because of the national security law. You might have thought that you have relaxed the legislation so that there can be dissolution and also liquidation procedures to enable them to take these actions more easily. Well, you also might have thought that the national security law is good for Hong Kong, but then given the high risk, well, people might say that the higher the risk, the higher the profit margin. But then we haven't seen the upside yet. We have already seen the downside because the risk is so high. So will they be able to make investments without worry or fear? So that for Hong Kong as an international financial center, it will only exist in name. So when we discuss the tax reduction initiatives, whatever you're going to do, it will not be able to offset the impact of the national security law on Hong Kong's financial structure. So we would not be standing in the way of this. We would not be vetoing it. But then you will have to go back and think about it. Whatever you say, okay, you are preaching this to us. You say that this is going to cure everything. It's going to cure all illness. It's going to sail steadily into the future. But then is it going to work?
Mr. Christopher Zhang. President, Hong Kong is the country's world financial center. It is a must that we keep enhancing our competitiveness and provide diversity of investment products. However, very often, our legislation has lagged behind new developments. Take this bill as an example. The LPF bill is something the industry has been asking for from the administration for a long time so as to attract more PE funds to use Hong Kong as a base for registration. However, the review was only done 2 years ago, and this bill is only discussed here in this council. So this bill is late. Still, late is better than never. I hope that with the passage of the bill, we can expedite the development of PE funds in Hong Kong. Many regions are fighting to become wealth management centers. When we have more PE funds in Hong Kong, of course, will bring more job opportunities for the relevant sectors and more business opportunities. It will also strengthen Hong Kong's position as an asset and wealth management center. And as said in the paper, the OECD has got the base erosion and profit shifting package. So many funds are trying to operate as in an onshore manner. Hong Kong should take a share in the party. Unfortunately, our regulatory regime of funds is such that we cannot provide registration opportunities for them. And as for the capital allocation and other things, we haven't got enough flexibility. We haven't got a straightforward dissolution and winding up mechanism. So if we are to proceed further in this area, we must quickly improve our legislation. The national security law was promulgated on the 1st of July, and Hang Seng Index and transactions have made record high. This goes to show that the NS law helps to boost investment confidence and help our integration with the Greater Bay Area. In the Greater Bay Area, there are many INT startups. They can make use of the new fund structure to have access to capital for further development, and that means tremendous business opportunities. This will also enhance Hong Kong's role as a wealth management center. Now, only qualified funds can be exempt from profits tax. For these funds, starting the business here is most important. So I am happy to see the passage of the bill. I hope that After its passage, the government can implement the various measures as soon as possible so that qualified funds can start the business in Hong Kong so that we won't lose out to competitors. With these remarks, I fully support the LPF bill.
陳淑莊議員
Ms. Chan, Madame Deputy. Well, this council is now scrutinizing the Limited Partnership Fund bill. As pointed out by the legislative brief, the private equity sector is gaining popularity among investors. As of last year in Hong Kong, there are 560 PE funds with their asset size which is about 160 billion US dollars. Second to the mainland China in Asia. To facilitate the PE development will help different companies. Well, according to Christopher Chang said, the IT industry, and also to channel capital into a startup, including talent and technology, and also management, accountancy, MICE, legal, and tourism industry would afford them plenty of opportunities. Thus, the development of the private equity industry will be hugely beneficial. A lot of the countries and jurisdictions have started developing this earlier and better and even more famous. For example, Cayman, US, Delaware, Singapore, and Taiwan. A lot of the private equity operated in a limited partnership fund structure. The limited partnership would include at least one general partner and would be responsible for the legal liability and debt, and while the limited partner is responsible for the capital contribution and also entitled to profit sharing. Unfortunately, and Cap 37 into limited partnership ordinance, which enacted about a century ago, and is obviously been out of touch with the current demand and the market developments. The paper pointed out that the LPO does not have provision allow flexibility, capital contribution, and deal profit distribution. And for 3 point out that the continuity of the partnership, the limited partners cannot directly or indirect any part of the money. If the private equity fund is doing poorly, the limited partner cannot withdraw the investment amount. The current regime also lacks a dissolution regime. Thus, the private equity industry have all called on the governments to set up a new limited partnership regime. The private equity fall into long-term investment with higher risk. If the investors has keen acumen to also promise huge returns. Compared to the public mutual funds, it PE targeted private investors and family offices. The PE often invest in startup industries and emerging industries. Like I said, in IT or even culture or even biotechnology, which may fall under their scope, and they will invest in huge potential, but also company in distress, would able to bail them out or even revive them. Well, one recent example, well, one of the well-known names, well, even though we're not be cameras enthusiasts, well, it's not a gender difference. Well, probably we will photograph more often. But the 84-year-old Olympus cameras, the company recently have huge losses in digital camera and sold its partner business to a private equity fund. And scrutinizing this LPF bill is to set up a comprehensive regime. Compared to other jurisdictions, Hong Kong started off quite late, and yet we still have time to play catch-up. And the Hong Kong Service Development Council in 2015 had issued a consultation paper on the limited partnership structure for private equity funds. A report has cited the advantages or strengths of Hong Kong. Well, in this paper, well, there's just over 20 pages in total. Of course, it touched on quite a few areas. For example, on the partnership structure and local operating requirements. Well, these are suggested rules and for shareholders meeting and audited statements. Well, Madam Deputy, also a professional yourself, and also the proper tax arrangements and stamp duty arrangements, also proposals on them, and also to have an analysis to develop the Hong Kong as a onshore private equity hub, and also compare the limited partnership of the capital contribution or the regional comparison. So that it's also a comprehensive. Well, let's not say that it adopt a clear position, but at least it analyzed the flaws of the current regime and offer recommendations for an enhancement and also our inherent strengths. So that something we need to grab a handle. So what are our inherent strengths? And Hong Kong is in the center of Asia, and also the neighbor, the biggest private equity destination, and Hong Kong also have the single connection with the biggest fund managers, and also with a large group of business providers, for example, lawyers and auditors. And another advantage is that a lot of mainland investors are currently developing offshore operation. We suggest to set up shop in the Cayman or the British Virgin Islands to set up a legal entity to deal with external investments, whereas they would prefer to set up this entity in Hong Kong. The report also pointed out that a lot of the private equity fund operated in Hong Kong provide an attractive platform to facilitate these companies to register the new funds in Hong Kong. In the long run, we could attract the Western-based or Asian-based sizable PE funds or even the mainland PE companies to develop business in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has well acknowledged as a world financial hub, with a large population of financial professionals and also our new secretary that used to serve in the sector. In sort of fund management and private equity, we have extensive experience. And Hong Kong also have other professions related to PE, for example, lawyers, auditors, and administrators, and bankers, evaluation agencies. And all these sectors are indispensable in development of the PE industry. Well, in the backdrop of COVID-19 and the NSL, the investment outlook, well, to me, have plenty of clouds hanging in the horizon. Well, in the COVID-19, if I recall correctly, about 3 million cases. Well, during the pandemic, a lot of the nations already reviewed whether their existing investment projects or their mode of investment were overly reliant on abroad. And during the pandemic, they will probably review that the diplomatic relations with China, for example, and also the economic ties, that whether they should rely too much on foreign investment, where the local production and economy will be dragged down. And well, in terms of international relations, certain kind of investment projects may proceed as projected. Well, if Madame's Deputy may read from the news that when vetting for investment projects, the Indian government have been very careful or refused to accept any investment proposal with mainland backing, and that's been reported widely. Well, whether for the financial development or rather as a special situation for global diplomacy. Well, the three cases are just limited to the U.S. when the global total had already reached 11 million and counting, and 445 is we know that these few days the pandemic seems to experience an upsurge. Well, in the face of such a never-ending pandemic, and we don't know when the vaccine will be launched, and whether there will be side effects when it first roll out. I believe that to every country that they will need to examine their own resilience. Well, instead of capital flow and economic development will have far-reaching implications. As for whether we can make this work, as for how would the mainland situation play out, I suppose we need to wait and see. And for the mainland capital to go global, and would they come across any predicted surprise due to surprise factors? Well, a few members have already mentioned that national security law. In accordance to the People's Republic of China national security law, well, the national security touch on many aspects, which including communications, food safety, economic system. Well, I'm holding the national security law in my hand. Let's not talk about the sensitive area like military. Well, talk about the national security, touch on many aspects. For the local national security law, as for this part, it don't really clearly define. According to the government, well, the constitutional new order, well, as someone with some legal background, well, to be honest, I'm not fully comprehended. Of course, you will refer back to the PRC national security law. When I do the comparison, I found there's no in Hong Kong. Well, I will need to read the PRC NSL. Well, it encompasses a wide scope, especially on third part on the offense and penalties are quite severe. And the U.S. Secretary of State, speaking on the NSL, the Article 38 will apply to everyone in this planet, as long as you're human. And also issue a travel alert to their own nationals that they have to be careful that whether they will have any bound by this law. And what they claimed earlier, that it would target small group individuals or affect a small group individuals when, well, I suppose it could involve a lot of people and a lot of the companies may be implicated, and also a lot of the money will be implicated, and they'll have very severe legal liabilities. In Hong Kong, the maximum will be life imprisonment. Well, if you fall under the three special situations, well, you'll be tried in China. The maximum penalty will be life imprisonment or death penalty. Ms. Chen, can you please point out what has the NSL got to do with this bill? Well, I'm on it. We talk about investment. What on Article 38? Well, everyone in this planet will be affected. Well, I'll choose to surrender communications. A few days ago, we have see the implementation rules. When you talk about as the service provider or even those the service provider must accede to such requests. If they don't, there will be criminal liability or being fined. This provider could be local and foreign ones, and some few large media companies, we'll call it a giant, they were not able to accede to Hong Kong government's request. Whether they can work with Hong Kong, I believe it's hard to determine.
涂謹申議員。
James Toe. Madam Deputy, this limited partnership fund bill is an investment tool and also the form that it can take. So there'll be an additional tool available to tie in with the international trend. You can call that a financial infrastructure. So I'll be dividing my speech into 3 parts. First, the premise on this is that the administration has introduced this bill to serve several objectives. Number 1, it'd like to increase Hong Kong's competitiveness on asset and wealth management. That's why they have introduced this new fund structure in order to encourage more funds to come to Hong Kong. In fact, Madam Deputy, many funds worldwide are investment basis, so to speak. When they make their choices, there are a number of factors at play, one of which is, of course, whether or not it's an internationalized city that they're going to. And taking Hong Kong as an example is a very unique place because we are already an international financial center. Your rule of law and legal system, whether or not is trusted. But then recently, I think we have been dealt a very severe blow. Well, not only that the US has targeted Hong Kong or even China, but even Canada and Australia recently have also said that when it comes to the rendition of fugitives, would also end because they are worried that, for political fugitive offenders, of course, they are not going to surrender such fugitive offenders to Hong Kong, but then they are also questioning the impartiality and objectiveness of Hong Kong's legal system. They have voted a vote of no confidence, or at least for the time being, they don't have any confidence in our system at all. So you talk about developing the fund structures in Hong Kong, introducing new forms and new products and so on. So given the macroscopic structure, if you're not able to convince people that they should have confidence, then whatever you do is not going to work. Secondly, when you say that these funds can make investments in Hong Kong and they will be prepared to come to Hong Kong, then at least you will have to convince them that both the funds and also the talents, well, the funds would mean the investors, and then of course they are the bosses, and they are all over the world. Whoever has the money can set up such a fund, and then they can come to Hong Kong. And then if the boss thinks that it's worthy of their while to come to Hong Kong because they have trust in Hong Kong, then they will come. And also for the talents, like the fund managers, do they still think that Hong Kong is a safe place to come? Madam Deputy, if you've heard the news, the Australian government just announced that they would give advice to Australians to leave Hong Kong. For Australian nationals, they should leave Hong Kong. That's the advice of the Australian government. In fact, several governments have already issued travel alerts. Yes, you might say that for Australia and other places that have issued travel alerts, including the US, well, they are calling upon their nationals to leave. So what about these fund managers? Or in the future, through such limited partnership fund bill, you're talking about some locally set up funds, and they might be fund managers or they might be limited partners. But then these countries are calling upon their nationals to leave Hong Kong. because there can be retaliation and there can also be risk of arrest. Well, Hong Kong is not the former Lebanon or Beirut. And yet, these governments are calling upon their nationals to leave Hong Kong, and even for Hong Kongers. I think we also have a lot of worry, including financial talents. Well, from the financial perspective, Japan is now waving at them. In fact, Japan, when it comes to China, has always been more friendly and also more tolerating. And yet, now Japan is saying that if you are financial talents, you'll be welcome to Japan. So they'll be prepared to accept you. So it's not about introducing a law and then they can all come. If you look at the macroscopic political environment and also the economic environment, and also the macroscopic situation whereby one country, two systems can be implemented, where there is a high degree of autonomy and whether or not people have confidence in those. Well, these are all intertwined, okay? Madam Deputy, the US has already said that they would be scrapping Hong Kong's special status when it comes to tariff. So these are going to deal very severe blows to Hong Kong. So I think I'll have to stop here because there are other technical issues that I will have to touch on. The only thing that I can say is, in the event that Beijing thinks that I don't need Hong Kong to be an international financial center, I don't need Hong Kong to be a unique Chinese city. Well, remember, they may not want Hong Kong to be a political center. They have said that repeatedly. But then if they don't want Hong Kong to be a financial center, then of course you can do whatever you want. But then if they still want Hong Kong to be an international financial center, then at least they have to ensure that they would not be going too far, which might completely undermine foreign investors or foreign funds' confidence in Hong Kong. Mr. James Toh, I think you've already elaborated on that point meticulously enough. It's second reading, Madam Deputy. It's not CSA. But please speak on the subject of the Limited Partnership Fund Bill. I'll be spending my 15 minutes on the investment environment of Hong Kong, whether or not it's appropriate for investment funds. I never mentioned the three words national security law, Madam Deputy. Please continue. Please speak to the point. You can listen back to the tapes. I was talking about the macro political economic environment and also high degree of autonomy. So please do not be overly sensitive. So why are you so worried or scared of the national security law, Madam Deputy? If Beijing thinks that Hong Kong, when compared to Shenzhen and Shanghai, is exactly the same or even worse, there is no need for them or for us to be connected with the international financial community. Then they can do whatever they want. But then apparently the financial officials seated opposite to us, well, they've been doing this and that. They have come up with consultation papers and they've been doing roadshows and they are talking to others and stakeholders. So they are telling us that this is going to be just a marginal improvement. Yes, this is something that you have to do anyway. But then if you look at the macroscopic, the overall structure, if we are undermined to the root, then whatever you're going to do is not going to work. It's not going to help. Madam Deputy, coming back to the relatively technical issues, because this bill has not set up a bills committee. So in fact, our LSD has helped members by asking some questions, hoping that the administration can make the details better. For example, in the LSD's report, Para 8, they said that Clause 22 of the bill provides that for the general partners of LPF, with regard to the eligibility. They would also have to have appropriate arrangements when it comes to the keeping of wealth. But then in the government's reply to the inquiry made by the legal advisor, they said that if they fail to comply with Clause 22, they won't be held liable. So it's about the proper custody of assets. So if they are not required to comply with that, and if they don't have to show there any liability, then how can you ensure that this will work? Is it purely a statutory provision which will constitute an additional civil liability, which will then be a safeguard? And also, the LSD also wrote to the administration on Clause 89 about the defense, and they also made inquiries with the administration, and they said that for all the reasonable steps that could be taken is too abstract. And it has not talked about the reasonable steps that would have to be taken. And in the end, the administration has moved some amendments and will be debating on that. So they are now going to amend Clause 89 to talk about the defense. But then, are the amendments clear enough? Have they been able to respond to the query raised by the market? So that would also leave room for discussion. And also, we have also looked at the electrical brief, and it says that the administration will be offering streamlined channels to arrange for the transitional arrangements, because under the existing arrangement, well, any LPF will have to furnish documents and then they can migrate to the new system. That's the current arrangement. But then what about the workflow? And also what about the transitional period? Well, is there any limitation? There has been no express provision in the bill. So the administration will have to give an account to the sector so that they will be making preparation for that accordingly. Madam Deputy, in my conclusion, what I'm going to say is I would support this limited partnership fund bill. But then, what's more important today is for the administration to come clean on this. They will have to tell Beijing, yes, Beijing would have its own analysis. But then, where do we stand in terms of the international environment? When the recent situation is not just about the national security law, but then the series of events that have happened recently would render the entire international community would make them very concerned about this, because there are headlines about Hong Kong, and they're very concerned about Hong Kong.
From the government, from the parliament, and from the media, all these concerns show that they feel adversely about the situation in Hong Kong, not a positive one. A report, detailed report, should be made. Perhaps it's been done, but I don't know. There should be a detailed analysis conducted to the central authorities so that they can think from the perspective of Hong Kong, so that they get a better understanding of the actual situation in Hong Kong for their reference. My biggest concern is that if the 5-5 Alliance, G7, G9, European Union, US, UK, the situation will continue to unfold, and the consequence may be disastrous. I hope that since the Hong Kong SAR government is accountable to a certain extent to Hong Kong people, and when they talk to these fund companies, please give them more details and come up with first-hand analysis. Submit them to the central authorities. The collection of information and the analysis is important to Hong Kong's future and peace, and maybe that for the world. Ms. Claudia Mo.
Bill it didn't need to go through any bill committee. It tells you that practically all of us at this local legislature agrees that it's all well intended. The provisions are all positive. It's meant for the business and investment, in particular foreign investment, development in Hong Kong. And so we all assumed this is a very simple thing anyway. And who would say no to help boost foreign investor confidence in Hong Kong, indeed? And if you look at the details of this bill, or the provisions, the stipulations in there, you could tell that it's all meant to not just simplify it, but to make it convenient for people setting up privately offered funds, i.e. That they could include hedge funds even. It's all for, well, not all, but mainly for wealth management. And I heard some Beijing flunkies mentioning the fact that we're right, not in the middle, but at the doorstep of our new Greater Bay Area development, which has been boasted as China's answer to the Silicon Valley in the United States. And indeed, Hong Kong has been serving like a gangplank to the vast China market, and so on and so forth. But I was curious, I don't think I've actually heard anyone talking about Belt and Road. I thought that's another huge project in the name of our mother country, Belt and Road. And didn't C.Y. Leung suggested that Hong Kong could become the super connector in this gigantic mammoth project? Maybe it's died down, I don't know. The problem with this bill now is not the bill itself, it's its implementation in a parallel universe, we would call it. On the one hand, Hong Kong is this a vibrant international finance hub still, at least in this part of the world, in the Asian region. But on the other, we've become the headline story around the world for at least half a month now. Everyone was talking about how Hong Kong is sinking like a little boat. No, not an oil tanker, but a little boat, a sampan. It's really going down fast. So what's happening? On the one hand, we want to lure, to draw foreign investors coming in here to set up all these funds. But on the other, we're shooing them away. Now, I'll give you one example why I think people are fast losing confidence, if not actually trust, in doing business in this city. Now, only 2 days ago, this security chief who's supposedly in charge of our new security law as slapped onto Hong Kong by Beijing. I asked him, according to the provisions, the contents of the new law, could a journalist, a columnist who has expressed support, say, for Tibet independence, face arrest the moment he sets foot in Hong Kong? And the security chief said, oh, that sort of question is just so exaggerated and biased, irrelevant. There's no point to focus on one particular industry or trade, i.e. don't talk to me about journalists. So what about investors then? The fact that the official, the minister in charge, would try so hard to evade actual questions, perfectly sensible questions on foreign involvement in Hong Kong, or for that matter, China affairs, would help ensure that international business confidence would go even faster waning. That's the idea. We come to Hong Kong to do business. There's no point to get involved in local politics. People would think, we have nothing to do with local politics. Thank you very much. We are here to make money, and hopefully a large sum of money on a daily basis, hopefully. And you guys have been talking about secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. It should have nothing to do with foreigners, let alone foreign money or foreign investment or foreign business setups. But the fact is, Beijing made it clear that this new security law is globally applicable. So what does that mean? Do we not need some clarification? No. The answer is no. You ask any question in that regard, you would be dismissed as exaggerating and coming in with a lot of bias. This is the preposterous state Hong Kong is in at the moment. And it doesn't help, seriously, when I read Bloomberg Business News reporting, quoting a top Beijing Hong Kong official by the name of Zhang Xiaoming, who's very well known in Hong Kong. He had told reporters in the Chinese capital about a week ago now, saying things like, yes, this security law on Hong Kong, it's rather like a sort of Damocles. Excuse me. If that's the sort of term they would use over Hong Kong, you are practically shooing international businessmen away. The sort of Damocles, what's that about? It means that there's a situation, and, well, it's danger. And it's not just imminent, it's a clear and ever-present danger. If you describe Hong Kong as such a dangerous place, who would come to make deals with you? However you make it simple and convenient and agreeable and likable. There's no point. That's what I mean by parallel universe. You're trying to present two completely different business environments to investors, and most investors would prefer to play safe. They don't want to take unnecessary risks. That's obvious, and that's self-preservation. It's just humanity, right? It's just human nature. Now, Hong Kong used to have two distinct advantages over the rest of China. What I mean is major Chinese cities. When it comes to China business, China trade, trying to divide up the China pie. Many major business labels who are internationally known would have preferred to set up shop in Hong Kong. Some of them have been headquarters, but some at least their liaison office here. We used to have these two key advantages. The first is rule of law. The second is the free flow of information. The rule of law, yes, at least we have the sense of rule of law, because it's not just a system. When we talk about rule of law, it's also the spirit of rule of law. It's not rule by law, let alone rule by decree these days. And you cannot simply, the Carrie Lam regime, convince the international community that this new law that's been slapped on Hong Kong would not harm Hong Kong courts, would not harm our sense, our spirit of the rule of law as based in our common law system. How on earth are you going to have this new law that's been penned in every word, including punctuation marks, in Beijing and by Beijing, to strike a balance with our common law system? The fact that the government, the executive branch, on behalf of Beijing would be 1, the prosecutor, 2, the judge, 3, no jury, and 4, if they think the case is serious enough, they can extradite you back to the mainland. How scary could that be? And the second point is free flow of information. That's what prompted my question about free press, about journalism in Hong Kong and elsewhere. Free flow of information. We used to be the #1 Asian city when it comes to a vibrant practice of journalism. But these days, under the new law, they could indeed just search newsrooms and TV stations and news websites or premises without a warrant, if they choose to, right? And internet service providers must comply with any official demand for user information. You wouldn't dare to say you can't comply because you come under this new law. And so here we are. And you would say, oh, you're still exaggerating. This sort of Damocles talk, as quoted to that certain official. She was actually talking about this sort of being hung over an extreme, a small number of criminals in Hong Kong. But the point is, Hong Kong has a population of at least 7.5 million. What do you mean by extreme small number? 10%? 5% or 1%? Is there a ballpark estimate? We don't know. And so we're in this state of quite terror that anyone could just get into trouble if you have been proven disobedient. The fact that the young protesters would display blank placards could actually prompt the police to say, those who are holding blank placards, you could be breaching the new national security law. Just how more ridiculous can you be? Or can it be? In virtual reality, we have real service providers, and Facebook and WhatsApp, and you just name the big names. They all said that they will suspend any Hong Kong government request for user information. And how many countries have already issued tourism warning against Hong Kong? And the fact that Australia would actually urge its citizens in Hong Kong to quit, to leave Hong Kong. Business confidence. Thank you.
胡志偉議員。
Mr. Wu Chi-wai.
we're debating on the Limited Partnership Fund Bill. Many members who have spoken have pointed out that because of the national security law, the Limited Partnership Fund Bill, which is supposed to bring benefits to Hong Kong, may be affected by the national security law and may bear the brunt because our foundation has changed. If we take a look at the Legislative Council brief, we would see that the justification of the bill is based on one important consideration. That is, Hong Kong is one of the freest cities in the world. And we're able to attract capital from around the world, and also because of our good legal system and the rule of law, with great credibility, we have much more room for development. However, before the arrangement of Limited Partnership Fund was put in place, we had missed a lot of opportunities. Like Mr. Christopher Cheung mentioned just now, this bill has come by more than a decade late. And now we could still grasp the opportunity and present ourselves with more potential for development. However, we're now in July. On the 9th of July 2020, we see a drastic change. There is one important object of the Limited Partnership Fund Bill. With this new regime put in place, private equity funds originally being offshore could have an alternative approach so that there would be new opportunities of development, especially according to the electoral brief. Before this bill was introduced, Hong Kong was second in Asia after mainland China in terms of its attractiveness for funds to be set up in Hong Kong. So with the bill put in place, we can grasp the development opportunities in mainland China, and we can also benefit from the bill being the impetus of development. Unfortunately, since the 1st of July, there has been a drastic change. Secretary, on this issue, I don't know how you are going to convince investors that Hong Kong remains the same as before. Hong Kong is just the same as before. Or rather, you're now facing this challenge as well, because we're supposed to have one country, two systems in Hong Kong, and we have our own intact legal system. We may have the anti-money laundering and counter financial terrorism laws, setting out very clearly offenses. Now, foreign investors operating in Hong Kong may need to deal with a rather opaque piece of legislation on top of the existing laws in Hong Kong that provides great clarity, and that is the national security law. I don't want to dwell into too much detail, but I would say that some elements are quite horrifying, because the national security law is extended to everyone in Hong Kong, and everyone who sets foot in Hong Kong, and every institution or organization whom and which are deemed to endanger national security. And also,
One of the articles suggests that where there is inconsistency between the national security law and the laws of the Hong Kong SAR, the national security law shall prevail. Teresa Chang and John Lee, both secretaries answered members' questions at the joint panel meeting, and yet none of their answers could convince us. That the impact of the national security law could be clearly defined. Well, they may say, as long as you don't break the law, you'll be fine. But that's not how a legal system works, especially in the global community. We need to give assurance by having a clearly defined offences in our legal system. Against this backdrop, the next important question is this. In the Limited Partnership Fund Bill, once it is passed, it is anticipated that more PE funds will set up its base in Hong Kong, and I believe this is also the common aspiration. And yet, we face competition on two fronts. With change in our legal landscape being a drastic one, we have competitors around the world competing for capital and talent. And for other governments, I believe that under the current epidemic, they are also anxious in attracting talents to help them form a new financial base in their countries. So this will cause a brain drain in our society. Secretary, of course, you may need to ponder this question. In the face of keen competition around the world, what do we have to retain our talents? Or should we continue to put up a brave face and just tell everyone that you'll be fine as long as you don't break the law and you know full well what you're doing? But then it's really uncertain whether I am breaking the law because I'm not sure what the law is about. So how do you instill confidence in the public? Also, it's clearly spelled out in the paper. Mainland China has a sizable PE market because we are second in Asia after mainland China. So if I am an investor and if I want to reap a big profit, why should I choose Hong Kong? If even before the bill is passed, there is already a good foundation for PE funds in mainland China, why should I choose Hong Kong instead? Why should I pay Hong Kong this premium? Because we have towering property prices, cramped living space, poor air quality, and a really stressful living environment. What incentives do we provide for investors to choose Hong Kong as an onshore investment base? You need to think about these points because the bill itself is good. It's just another investment vehicle. We're not going to object to it. But I hope that the government will come up with responsive measures since this is already quite outdated. We need to come up with new measures to keep up with the times. Of course, you're in no position to ask the Central People's Government to withdraw the national security law, but you need to explain the benefits to the public. And this is your responsibility. And if you can't even explain Hong Kong's advantages, then what are you doing? Especially when we see that we were once regarded as one of the freest cities in the world, and now we've lost the crown. Can you just tell everyone that it would be fine if you stay in Hong Kong? We have a stable environment. Please come and invest. Because people will be deterred. They will not choose Hong Kong. They will turn to mainland China because of the ample opportunities, because of the investment size and low investment cost. And especially on mainland China, I know how to dodge the shady areas, whereas in Hong Kong, we call ourselves an international city. Yet under the national security law, there is an offense of colluding with foreign forces. I don't know what exactly it means. It seems to be an arbitrary accusation. And this is a straitjacket on investors. So for the scenarios described in the Limited Partnership Fund Bill, may I just say that since the time when this paper was published, things have very much changed. And even if the Limited Partnership Fund Bill is passed, you need to face a lot of issues. Apart from fund structures, the structure in Hong Kong as a whole has changed. There has been an overhaul, and as the bureau chief in charge of the policy, you need to come up with measures in response to that. You cannot just invite mainland investors to come and speculate in our market and say we have a V-shaped rebound and that the market is very robust. If this worked, then the financial centers in mainland China would have been established long ago. Now, within Hong Kong's legal system, the front gate has been widely open because of the national security law, and with the Office for Safeguarding National Security setting up its base in Causeway Bay, in the center of Hong Kong Island, can you still expect Hong Kong to have a high degree of autonomy? There is not even pretense anymore. So how can you convince the public and the international community that there is a future for Hong Kong? Finally, my point is this. As the title suggests, we need to have regard to the international view because we're the international financial center. We must not close our doors to foreign investment, because otherwise we won't fare as well as mainland China. They have a population of $1.4 billion, 1.4 in the population, billion in the population, and they have a huge investment base. But if we close our doors to investment, then mainland China has a much larger market than Hong Kong. And we're talking about private equity funds, and that includes IPO, initial public offerings, which has been the linchpin of Hong Kong's success. Now, if we close our doors to foreign investment, we will only be relying on mainland investments and capital. We need to ask whether Shanghai sets an exemplary example. And if a city could rely on mainland investment and be successful, then Shanghai could be a successful international financial center as well. In other words, even if the bill is passed, I'd say the Hong Kong SAR government will be facing a lot of challenges, much more than those presented in the bill. Times have changed, Hong Kong has changed, and the SAR government has to face the challenges brought about by the national security law because of the major changes. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I will invite the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury to reply. The debate will then come to a close. Secretary. Madam Deputy, first of all, I thank electoral members, the industry and stakeholders for providing their views on the bill. I'd like to thank the Secretariat and the legal advisor for the hard work and comments as well. The object of the bill is to introduce a limited partnership regime for the operational needs of investment funds with a view to attract private funds such as the private equity funds and venture capital funds to establish and operate in Hong Kong. Now, contrary to what the members suggest, we're not trying to close our doors to investment. We want to attract foreign investment, and they provide a new key impetus to the growth of asset and wealth management in Hong Kong. There is all the more reason for the bill to be passed to maintain our competitive edge, to bolster our status as a premier international asset and wealth management center and an international financial center. Together with the opportunities presented by the Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong has the potential to develop itself onto an onshore base for PE funds in Asia. In designing this new regime, we have considered the views of the industry and make reference to international experience, and we will strive to strike a balance between facilitating development and ensuring investor protection. It contains a number of points. For example, a fund qualifying for registration must have one general partner and at least one limited partner constituted by a limited partnership agreement or LPA. And the registrar of companies will be responsible for registration. An application must be submitted by a legal representative that should be a registered office in Hong Kong. As for the day-to-day investment management functions, investment decisions must be made under the LPA. Some members mentioned how we should increase resources for the ROC and improve the arrangements. And from the perspective of investors' protection, we propose to empower the ROC with a number of functions, and we also establish a number of offences. For example, soliciting investors without setting up an LPF and making false statements, destroying documents, etc. Some members also mentioned the alignment of this regime with SFC's regime, and that is for Type 9 license. If authorized by a general partner to operate and run the fund, and if the fund is included under SFO, then Type 9 license of the SFC will be required. And if the partner manages and operates the fund itself, then the partner should be a licensee of Type 9 license. And we've also proposed certain amendments subject to the views of the legal advisor, and some of the amendments already is a response to the points raised by Mr. James Ho. There are also transitional arrangements, etc., and we will implement these measures after the bill is passed. There is also a point on clause 22. Having discussed with the industry, we want to maintain flexibility for the industry, and there is no criminal liability pursuant to clause 22. Many professional bodies and legal professional bodies have forwarded their views to us, and they support the bill and would like the bill to be passed as soon as possible. Because it will strengthen our edge in setting up an operation of the funds, it will also drive up demand for professional services, and other industries will also benefit. All in all, we urge members to support the bills and the amendments, which I shall move in due course so the bill can come to effect on the 31st of August this year. Thank you.
I now put a question to you that the Limited Partnership Fund Bill be read the second time. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Member Claims Division, bill will be waiting for 5 minutes.
開始。
Please proceed to vote. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting now ends. I display the results. 43 present, 35 for, 6 against, 1 abstention. Let me read out again. 43 present, 35 for, 6 against, 1 abstention. I think the question is agreed by majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Limited Partnership Fund Bill. This Council now becomes Committee of the Whole Council to consider the Limited Partnership Fund Bill. Members may refer to the appendix to the script for the debate and voting arrangements for the bill. Members have been informed that the committee will conduct a joint debate on the clauses, schedules, and amendments